Thank you very, very much.
That's a great answer, and I especially am pleased that ESA has a goal of sending humans to Mars because, you know, NASA has not had that goal since President Clinton eliminated it in 1996. NASA, nowhere, in no current NASA will send humans to Mars.
This brings me to another point, if you allow me. NASA has this space architect. This space architect, Gary Martin, he does other things than you architects. So I think we must be a little bit careful with choosing our words or our definitions.
Well, we call him the space anthropologist. He actually has a PhD in anthropology.
Yes, we know this
Yeah, but
situation
he
very
is
much.
the NASA architect, okay? The space architect, okay? And we have heard in this conference several others. There was the national security architect, I believe, this morning, and others. I don't know how you want to deal with that, but somehow this architecture that we are dealing with here is different from that architecture that we have heard about. So I think that's something for this panel to take into account.
It's an issue, and
Think about.
we're actively working on that issue right now.
Yeah, actually, I want to, related to that, I wanted to ask Mark, because I'm sure he has lots of opinions on this. I mean, as space architecture, as we define it here, has really had any impact on NASA design until now? If not, when will it?
Well, yes.
I know that you've tried. I know that
Yes,
you've
well, Maynard Dalton was the architect for Skylab. He was a graduate architect at Johnson Space Center who was the architect for that, and he had help from Raymond Loewy, the industrial designer. Then for International Space Station, the four standoff interior configuration was developed by Rod Jones at Johnson Space Center, who's a graduate architect. And two licensed architects, Chris Kennedy and Constance Adams, did the Transhab project. And I worked on various aspects of Space Station myself. I introduced the nodes and the cupola into the Space Station configuration, and got a number of patents. And we developed the first wardroom table for Space Station, and we of course still don't have a wardroom table, but on the station. But we also developed the Suitport EVA access facility, which continues to reappear in the literature. Lots of people want to develop it. In fact, this Russian team at Energia is building a high-fidelity working mechanical prototype of a suit port for rear entry to a spacesuit as sort of like an airlockless airlock. So yeah, we have an impact. Often management doesn't know about it, but that's nothing unusual.
And the issue of Gary Martin and the whole issue of this title, the NASA's space architect, so to speak, is a big issue that we're talking about, because actually in the United States there are laws against people using the term architect that are outside of this field of architecture. And,
yeah, in every state, it's a crime to represent yourself as an architect if you're not licensed as a licensed architect. However, there's sort of an exemption for federal employees who can make up their own titles.
But Gary Martin is not the first one. I think the Air Force had already a space architect since 15 years.
Then there's a national security communications architect I met yesterday. Basically the root comes from architects as in buildings, and it's been adopted. There are systems architects in the computer industry, and computer architects in the computer industry. And it's just gotten out of control, especially when they use it as a verb, when they talk about architecting a new system, instead of designing a new system,
So would you have an idea on how to make a distinction between the systems design and the architecture design?
that is a big question, and we're debating it now. In our case, our specialty is, of course, dealing with the spaces that humans live and work in is our main point. Mark's, I don't know if you heard Mark's definition earlier on what we define space architecture as, but we
It
of course.
sounded a little bit awkward, so I.
Yeah, it is. Well, basically, I have to write more about this, but basically, the way I see it is that space architecture is essentially an extension of Earth architecture, but the definition, the legal definition of an architect in the United States is that you can prove your ability to protect the health and safety of the public in the built environment. And the only thing that's different in space is that the environment is much more unforgiving. It's a much more dangerous environment. And so as a result, you need to be aware of many more environmental conditions and hazards and safety issues. And safety is always the most important issue in everything we deal with. So it's really a matter of degree, and you know, my philosophy about materials is that all materials have the same properties, they just have them in different amounts, in different quantities, but they all have the same properties. And so you've got to understand materials from that point of view, rather than the point of view that they're natural materials and, you know, and man-made materials or whatever. That's sort of an irrelevant sort of distinction which people make on Earth, but in space, you need to take a different approach.
Can I just add to this discussion of the definition of the architect? Right now, but I know that this is work that is in progress, there are people that are working to define the profile of the space architect. Now, we're still here, we're still defining the profile. So in order to define a program, curricula, academic curricula, in order to provide education for the space architect. So this is an ongoing process. It's difficult to get a definition when the process is still, it's really still starting. The profile is still being created gradually. So probably we will look for a definition when we have the profiles established. I don't know. That's my view.
Just real quick, I have another engagement, so I need to pass off my position here to Mark, and he'll take care of the rest of it.
I wanted to ask another question, which is, you all come from quite a variety of educational backgrounds, and you know, we have certain paradigms of design education in the United States. What do you think is important for the education of a space architect? Well, I should say we have been having a series of workshops on education for space architects, and anything you say will be put into that database.
Well, actually, on my paper I presented yesterday, I was trying to talk about something about what do you need for a space for education to be a space architect, and I feel that it is important for the space architecture education to learn as much as possible. By that I mean you have to learn about, you have to understand both the space industry as well as architecture profession, as well as you need to learn about the bioastronautical life science. You have to understand space law. And there's a lot. I mean, space architecture involves a lot of different fields, and I feel that if it is important to understand how all these things interact in the space project.
It's not a difficult question. I think this is not very different from traditional architecture, because even in traditional architecture, many different things contribute to a project, and also the education and personality of the designer goes into the project. So as more things a person knows, the better the project comes. So valid for space architecture as well. So physics is welcome, and so also many other subjects. I would say all the subjects. Design, colors, physics, and anthropology, engineering, space law, and human factors, and everything.
A couple of days ago, Constance Adams sent me a list. It's a graph with the disciplines. Something you discussed in ICE is the disciplines that the architects should have in the curriculum, academic curriculum. For me, the issue now is, at this point, is to think whether it should be an undergraduate course of 6 years, as it usually is in Europe. I don't know about the States. For architecture, and space architecture will be a post-graduation course, or whether it's so different from the traditional architecture that it should be autonomous as an undergraduate 6-year course. This is for you to answer.
Yeah, for me it's the melting between industrial design, architecture, and product design. As product design, what I'm really focused on in an industrial design field, that you're not talking about an architect really as you are thinking about as we are talking about here on the ground, but a melting about more different kind of disciplines in an architectural background. I think it's a whole of several disciplines, what you can teach or what you can provide students with. So during my study it was interior design, furnishing, industrial design. It was a whole range of different teaching methods. So that was for me really interesting to get from everything a little bit and then make your own suitcase where you can travel with.
I definitely agree, it needs to be very interdisciplinary, but from my point of view, I think we also should really remind this, as I mentioned earlier, the communication part, that we don't have to learn like everything ourselves, but it's very important that we learn to communicate with all the different other disciplines. And also one experience that I think is important is to work closely with the different agencies like NASA and European Space Agency, and to collaborate together. And for me it was also extremely important really to experience weightlessness, as that created a totally new understanding of volumes and movements and work. And so I think that would be like included in the education to really have parabolic flight and try out solutions to really do the best prototypes. So,
Let me just take liberty of answering my own question, which is what I always tell people is who want to be architects and space architects, that they should complete their qualifications to be a licensed architect before they really get committed to space architecture, because number one, there are very few jobs in space architecture. There are actually right now only about 3 people making in NASA, getting paid to be space architects in a direct sense, and then there may be half a dozen architectural graduates who also work for NASA or the aerospace companies. Second, it's very important to have that professional licensure qualification. It does a lot to help your credibility, and it gives you the sense of responsibility and liability for the whole design problem. Does anyone else have a question or comment? Madhu, surely you have something to ask.
I don't know what to ask because, I hold degrees in engineering and architecture. And my understanding is that the education process, the 5 years you spend in engineering school, is quite different from the 5 years you spend in architecture school. And for me, my bias at the end of it all was that I like architectural thinking better than engineering and scientific thinking. And the difference that I see here between professionals is that engineers can drill on the details once you bound a problem for them. Architects tend to enjoy bounding a problem. I mean, going out, working out of bounds, bringing new things into the picture, and making a problem. Engineers have great difficulty in making the right problems. And we are in that trouble now. I mean, you look at space station, and everybody's asking, why did we build it? What are we doing there? What are we doing? So I'm thinking that architects have a prime responsibility in dreaming up worthwhile projects. It comes to us naturally because we read outside the box. We love to go read the tabloid magazines, and then next minute you're reading on that magazine, all kinds of things. And then of course you draw and do a lot of good things. So I personally would think of an education of a professional that includes some design and architecture and some design and engineering, so that we appreciate both camps. And if you look at the history of people practicing it, including Mark, I suppose, is that in a industrial environment, like you find in the defense industry or the aerospace industry, the forces play in such a way that some people end up with all these fires that force them to synthesize things. And they get names like configurator, system integrator. Essentially, these are architecting tasks, synthesis, bringing things together, and most importantly, not very scientific, because you always end up with 2 or 3 choices that you can choose. And the architect is the person who really makes that decision. It's going to be green, it's not going to be blue. And if you are forced in Congress to say, why did you make it blue? It is a very subjective answer. I made it blue because the paints were available to me. So, that kind of thing. You end up with that kind of thing. Architects do that. Engineers are not trained to do that. So, in total, I think both are very important. You can't do without the numbers that the engineers provide you. And at the same time, somebody's got to be gutsy and say, this is it, guys. We're going to go to the show. And you see it in Congress. The agency in all its might and glory, $14 billion a year, they'll bring you one fat proposal to Congress and tell you it's going to cost you $8.5 billion to build. And these are gentlemen you're talking to, Congress. People have gone through liberal education, they're ruling the country. And you come and say, this is how it's going to be. And they say, any other choices? Well, we don't have a budget to make choices. Architects, rule number 1, you make choices, plenty of choices up front. If you can't do this, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. You continue. It's an architectural thing. It's not taught in engineering. These are my thoughts.
That's great, yeah. But did you have a question?
No, that was my comment,
I
appreciate what you guys are doing. My only question is this. I was in this board 20 years ago. I was in India. I was dreaming about space. that country does not have a human space program. And I was dreaming about humans in space, and I'm wondering, how come each of you
And you can go back.
come from a country that does not have a human space program, but you want to be space architects? What is driving you? Is it the same craziness, or you have a reason?
We're all human beings, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
I think, yeah, for me it's the main to explore, actually, never stop exploring in every field what you can search for. I mean, that's for me the reason that I can do what I believe in and do what I think I will be good in it, so never stop exploring, so, yeah.
I can recognize a lot what you are saying now. So, and also I feel that there are already too much, like things like this, chairs or cups or whatever. So, as a designer, I would like to contribute with something more than a chair. So, I think that's a good reason as anything else. So, that's my idea of it.
I think I like it to be a space architect because of a mix of the challenge of unknown and the challenge of a very difficult design that has to combine shape and functionality. And also it's all space related things are very interesting and they have a kind of mystery, which is nice.
Yeah, the unique exploring the unknown,
Yeah.
outer space. Yeah, I think that's a very, very
Yeah, I think also that space architecture maybe is the only one architecture which has not been defined or how to do it yet, because we're still in the process of thinking what is space architecture. And I think that is the main things which attract me to go to here, because I could participate in the process of thinking what it is. And so I think it is something which I feel is very, very exciting.
And I think, David, you had another answer, which is that you want to bring back the aesthetic of the outer world, outer space, into terrestrial architecture.
That's
as
right,
the
yeah.
capital in that.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, very noble.
Yeah. I mean, my ideal would be if the general architecture and space architecture can become closer, or even, I mean, ideally become the same things. Because ultimately, space architecture is architecture. It's just generalization. It's whether it's on Earth or in space, it just depends on your perspective of how you see space is or how you see Earth is. Yeah, but that, I don't know, maybe it's beyond my time, but it would be nice to see them getting closer together.
Okay, great. I'd like to thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate, more than you can imagine, the fact that you came so far to participate in this conference and to support the activities in aerospace architecture. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you all. We have a few more design engineering technical committee brochures for anyone who wants to receive one. So, how close to finishing are you? And what are your plans after that? Tackle this up.